Tonight it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for 2021, Baseera Khan, a performance and visual artist based in Brooklyn. Their work, and this is a quote, sublimates colonial histories through performance and sculpture in order to map geographies of the future. And I love their use of sublimates in this context. And mapping geographies of the future. Baseera's most recent solo show, Snakeskin, took place at the end of 2019, so about a year ago, at Simone Subal Gallery in New York. Their work's been exhibited widely, including in Munich at the Munich Documentation Center for the History of National Socialism, which would be Nazism. Jenkins Johnson Projects, which is based in LA, but Baseera did a project at their Lefferts Gardens space, an apartment venue, at Sculpture Center in Long Island City, the Aspen Art Museum, and the amazing and incredible Participant Inc. Their performances have been presented at the Whitney Museum of American Art and at the other end of the spectrum, Art Pop, a music festival in Montreal. Baseera has done residencies at the Kitchen, Pioneer Works, and Abrams Art Center, and they traveled to Jerusalem and Ramallah in Palestine on a fellowship from Apex Art. That was in 2015. Lots of support from institutions like BRIC. Baseera won the BRIC Colleen Brown Art Prize and received grants from the Joan Mitchell Foundation, the New York State Council on the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, and Art Matters. And their work is in the collections of the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, Kadist in San Francisco, and the Walker Art Center. Baseera's work has been reviewed or featured in a bunch of important art magazines, Artforum, Art in America, BOM, Brooklyn Rail, in TDR Drama Review, in 4 columns, and also in the New York Times and the New Yorker. Baseera attended Skowhegan, which is formerly known as the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. They received an MFA from Cornell University and a BFA from UNT, the University of North Texas in Denton, which I happen to know has a pretty strong art program. Baseera, thanks so much for joining us.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Did somebody say that?
That was Siri somehow responding to me.
That's because she's like, who is Baseera?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. The way that the tenor in your voice felt so considered, and thank you. It felt like there was so much care with the way that you were sharing who I am, because I feel like that's important. I feel like I need to know who you guys are, and you need to know who I am. So thank you. I am going to share some slides, and then I'm going to move off PowerPoint and share some footage of an experimental TV show that I am working on currently. I was also going to show you 2 bodies of work that I completed just recently, and share with you a floor plan of a solo exhibition that's coming up at the Brooklyn Museum in September. So I hope to see all of you there, September 10th. Put on your calendar. So there we go. That's the program. Can I have some elbow room in this canon? The canon is a canon, a body, an armchair weapon, one that refuses my body, that rules over my body and applies mainstream principles and standards. In a field where I race from my race as the canon sits far away. Axiomatic, universally binding, with little to no experience to judge me or my kin. It's a damn shame. There is no legacy that I may follow, And my pain is my intimacy. Intimacy is what defines one's politics, full stop. So I make my work on my own terms from what I see. Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? President Donald Trump, January 12th, 2018. Okay, so that kind of ends that section, which I just wanted to share a kind of artist statement to get you in the mood of what I am having to navigate while I'm thinking about the history of aesthetics, the history of making, actually, and genres of painting or performance or installation. It's impossible for me to get into the studio and to get into the mind frame without all that noise buzzing around my head. So I wanted to share this deconfliction training video with you as a relief. So here we go.
$95 a month, but if you sign up for 6 months and pay by credit card, it drops to $750.
Too much math for me.
Right. Well, that's the savings of $245 a month.
What would you do? She likes him.
We're not interested in her.
He's quite the salesman.
One of his many talents. Subject approaching. We got it.
Do I have to decide today?
No, of course not. Just take the form and let us know.
This form requires a lot of information.
Who's looking for? Excuse me. What's the box? 401. The key doesn't turn. 401. What's your name? Nelson. It was okay yesterday. Oh, yeah. We had to change the lock. It was broken. It was broken yesterday. And your card's out of date. There's no address. This is my address. That's why I rent the box. Well, we need to know where you work then. Brahim! I thought that was you.
Who the hell is that?
He followed the subject in. Check Face ID.
It's been a long time. Don't you remember? We met at the conference at Suleiman's.
Oh, yes. No match yet.
Is that a gun?
Sure looks like it. Our visitor has a weapon.
As soon as I'm done here with my business, I need to talk to you about something. If you are not too busy, would you like to get some coffee? Could go down the street.
Sir, we need an emergency contact, an employer, friend. Come on, Mr. Nelson, just give us a name.
He's spooked. We don't lose him.
I'll come back later. Take him up.
Put your hands up. Put it down.
Revolving? I'm going.
Police, drop your weapon. Hold your fire. I'm a federal agent. Keep your hands where we can see him. FBI. INS.
Secret Service.
Wasn't one of those guys supposed to be a terrorist?
All right. So let me get back to seeing y'all. How'd y'all like that?
It was bizarre.
Unmute and tell me how that made you feel. Because I only got a little bit of time here, so you know it's like I'm asking questions. But I'll continue if we don't have.
No, I totally support you here. I would really appreciate it, students, if each of you would very quickly please unmute and participate.
I just want to get a read in the room because it feels that that video, though that video is in response to the height of Islamophobia and like immigrant and DACA kind of like milieu, it's also very important to see that video again because it's basically what's happening right now where we don't know what media is real media and we don't know who is actually on the side of democracy, right? So I want to hear just real quickly, how'd that video make you feel? How do you feel?
I think wildly uncomfortable to profile people just off the bat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe 2 more responses, please, out of the 40 that are here.
I think also outside of that, it showed a lot of like how many institutions of surveillance exist and how separate they are and kind of act independently, which is also very important, especially here in the US.
Thank you.
And also like the stereotypes of a white kind of FBI agent and then doing that, there's a lot of stereotyping going on.
Mm-hmm. Those responses were so insanely awesome and on point. I want to hear one more response.
There are some super smart people here right now. And I just, come on, guys. And people.
Oh, do you want me to go get my nail file? Because I'm the ice queen.
Get it. Okay, so I'm gonna.
I was thinking about the hyper reality, and this representation. It's so possible, but the reality that we live in, it's so weird because we like can understand that it could happen. So it's like it's horrifying a little bit. I think so.
Yeah, and I get the silence. I get that like some of you are listening, some of you may not be, but I think that there's a sense of dumbfoundedness because we're here. Like that is essentially what we just experienced on January 6th. And that's why I decided to add that deconfliction training video into this, because sometimes when we make media, when we make art, you never really know how it's going to age. And I think that this video has, for me, become a tool, but has become a work of art because it's translating into so many different forms of and problems that we're having right now in this country, which has a lot to do with surveillance, which has a lot to do with cancel culture, which has a lot to do with everything that you all contributed. So thank you. Okay, we'll go back. I'll stop harassing you. But it won't be my first time. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so here's me digesting the entrance of the last 4 years. So what I did was I created kind of a panel, ongoing panel discussion of whoever wanted to join me. I called it What's Next? And so I just tried to translate it in my own way in multiple different languages. And I would try to like create Facebook pages and working groups where we all got together, where we would all sit around and we'd have these discussions. And sometimes the discussions would get into a situation where there were just too many people talking at the same time. So then we created working groups. And this is kind of how I dealt with the first year of the last 4 years. But then during COVID, and you know, this is another example, is me doing like an address on January 20th, 2017. I was at the Whitney. The Whitney kept their doors open all day long, and they had artists come in and out and like address the nation on what they wanted to out of the world, what they wanted from the programming at the Whitney. It fell on deaf ears, but if you want to watch my address, you can just do a screenshot of this and you can find it on your own time. But going back to this, I'm currently in this app right now called Clubhouse. And it's an invite only, but I guarantee that if you end up into Clubhouse, it's going to be the future. It's going to be a place where classrooms exist, because currently it is a classroom. So the work that I was doing in real time pre-pandemic in these workshops, in these abandoned art spaces that I had access to, I now do online. I've been on Clubhouse all day long trying to talk about male masculinity and like what's going on in the current politics of the United States. And so it's just like a bunch of different people in these different classrooms that you can go in and out of and have these discussions. So just a little bit of either, if you're in it already, great, and if you're not, just a nod to the future, because there's a lot of art making that's possible through these new apps and new technology. And so here we are. I think that at this point we can begin looking at some of my work in a more substantial way. I mean, not a more substantial way, but like a way where it's like more traditional. Like the Nike shoe is definitely a part of my work, but I left it in the lurch, meaning I left it without explaining. I just kind of couched it into my artist statement. So these are just the beginnings of when I decided, okay, I'm not going to paint anymore. I started doing these archive works where I would arrange and set up different ephemera of my past into these photographs, and I'd print out the photographs, and those photographs would then be my artwork. And this work kind of started right after graduate school in 2012. I was doing a litany of other things, and so I would use my iPhone and take photographs and then set these things up in Photoshop, and I would make printouts. And in fact, this is the work that I ended up getting into Skowhegan with in 2014. So this is a great example of how like I was using my early stages of art making to really organize my politics, organize my mind, and try to find a positionality for my body to sit in. Because up against the backdrop of Supreme Court's decision on a Muslim ban in 2018, had I not done this work beforehand to kind of understand my positionality, I think I would have had a mental breakdown. I personally would, because I wasn't shocked because, I'm from Texas, and my father himself, is a mixed race man who had to leave his own country to come to the United States to then have to deal with another forms of racism and whatnot. So, like when these travel bans happened, I was already doing the work to make work, to like put my anxieties in creating, to even if I didn't have the money to do so, I was finding really affordable ways to make work in the interim while I was traveling to my job, or when I was at home watching TV. I would just try to like arrange all these different aspects of my life. So in 2017, I then did a solo exhibition at Participant Inc. It's a nonprofit space in the Lower East Side. And Leah Gaetano, the founder, was bright enough to understand that I had a lot to say, but then she also encouraged me to go ahead and share my work with the world. So I called the show Am Withlima. It was on February 26, 2017. And again, the climate was just, though the stuff that Colin Kaepernick had done in the media, in pop culture, he had done this work well after Trump's entrance. Trump and like Republican parties and Democrats, especially the bipartisan Democrats, are always trying to find ways to take voice away from us, take voice and find ways to capitalize upon the voices. And so here I am trying to like build out this exhibition in 2017, and I just like look at my sensibilities. And so because I was already archiving my own ephemera, my own body, my sense of politics, I went ahead and continued that as a tradition. So I always identify images in the world as the source image, and then I build out installations around that. So these are source images, and which led me to this work. And this is like my poor planning of this PowerPoint presentation. So forgive me for that. But what I should have done is placed one of the Nike shoes here that you saw above with that says Am Withlima. So that shoe was actually put into this church. There's a St. John the Divine's church, and they have like these annual exhibitions. And this exhibition was called Sanctuary. So I did not want to show the shoe because of its adoration within the sneaker culture. It had already been someone had already tried to steal it from the exhibition. And so I was kind of wary to show the shoe because there was no real way to protect the shoe from getting lifted by a sneaker geek. So the church promised me that it would be held under lock and key and it would be safe, and they would put a camera on it. So this is us looking at the camera. So what we have here is a man who comes in to the church, pretends like he's on the phone. He lifts the shoes out of the box, puts it in his bag, and he walks away. So I have to see you guys. Okay, so where are you? So basically, I'm showing you that because, why am I showing you that? Because though I made this shoe based on a system with the Nike shoes where they censored me from writing the word Muslim and Islam on the shoe because they were afraid that it would incite violence because it was a terroristic word. And so there was a huge lawsuit, and that is why Colin Kaepernick was then asked to be the face of Nike, because through the lawsuit and the boycott, Nike lost billions of dollars. And so in order for them to get back or grab back the Muslim world, or like people who sympathize and empathize with freedom, they asked Colin Kaepernick to come and be the face to kind of clean up that mess. They also made hijabi wicks and all these kinds of things, right? And so this is one of the reasons that the church wanted me to show this work in this exhibition called Sanctuary. But then what happens? This happens. I end up with the DA's office begging them to not put this man in prison. So that is what ends up happening when I am like kind of making the work that I make that comes from my surroundings and my political position. So we end up doing a plea bargain with the DA's office, and he then helped us receive the shoes back. I have the shoes now. And then he just gets a slap on the hand, and he has to like clean the church for the next 3 years instead of having to go to prison. Okay, so full stop, let's go into some other work. So acoustic blankets. I was an incredibly shy person, and in a lot of ways I still am. I always have like 10% of my brain is always doubting what I just said before, what I'm about to say. So it stilts me, but I wanted to be a pop star. So the only way I could do that is to get I wanted to be a pop star. So the only way to do that was to get behind the blanket and under the blanket. And by doing that, I was able to perform in the ways that I wanted to perform while I was just getting kind of my feet wet. And so I was able to, I can't really see, yes. So I was able to do that work, and it became kind of a Andy Kaufman, who's one of my favorite comedians from the past, kind of esque comedy routine that then was studied by a few songs that I had been creating over time that I would then collaborate with friends. So that's kind of the whole purpose of the acoustic blanket, is that it shelters me from hearing what's going on outside of the blanket. And it also allows me to have conversations with people without me necessarily knowing what you look like or you knowing what I look like. And so I was able to tour the blanket to several places and do this performance over and over again, and I intend to do so in the future. I just wanted to move on to do other things. I took it out on protest marches, demonstrations, women's march demonstrations. That's my mom. That's me. So the other thing I did was I was like looking at large large public art sculptures, male sculptures, and then like Richard Richard Serra here. And then I took my blanket soft sculpture, small scale person to these large sculptures and interacted with them, interacted inside them. I would like not deface them, but I would want to interact with them in ways that I felt like I could relate to. So I was trying to throw my Nike shoes up to get it caught on the top, which is an impossible task because it was too tall. But you know, I performed that anyway. And then I found out that David Hammonds had done the same work to a 1981 Richard Serra sculpture in Tribeca. This is what the work looks like when it is just simply, you know, static in a gallery space. So you can see how it's constructed. It's made out of silk. It has felt inside of it. It is reducing, sound reducing. It has grommets on on one side because it's actually meant to be adorned onto a wall to prevent sound waves from entering. And also the gold entry point is what I like to call a portal. It's a transitional space. Anything can happen in that transitional space. And the gold material on the outside of it is a pattern that my mother and I put together from lots of different Islamic and South Asian and East African patterns that she and her family has kept for over 100 years. So it's a woman's work in a way. It's like archival work because, you know, these shapes, these patterns are actually also archival. They're teaching you about a certain kind of niche people and the way in which people see aesthetics. So a reading room is simply a kind of idea I have, a book that a participant and I are currently working on. This is just some of the pages soon to come. It's called Kordashan, a play on Quran. So it's just kind of like a Bible or a holy grail of all the work that has been leading up to what I'm doing now. This is a scene of that 2017 I Am Withlima exhibition. And I call this the reading room because it's a place where I can share my ideas. People can just grab a book and sit down and just like thumb through it. A lot of annotations are in there. And then over time, as this reading room on purpose travels, the books expand because then I'm asking other curators and other artists and other thinkers what books affect them, and so the bibliography just grows. And which is one of the reasons why this I Am Withlima shoe that was stolen from the St. John the Divine Church, which you're seeing on the left and on the right, this was the reading room on purpose. And this shoe usually ends up within these glass cubes to display the memory, the literature and the thought process that goes into collaboration. So this is an expanded library as well. Okay, so psychedelic prayer rugs, a different set of works. So this also comes from a space of conflict because Kashmir is constantly trying to prove its sovereignty from so many different nations and conflicts and colonization to this day. And you'll see works that I'll share with you towards the end that come from the same space in Kashmir, from the same rug makers that we had to confiscate the material last August August 2019 because there was like a huge conflict and a shutdown, and so we had to actually extract the material and send the material from Kochi to New York so that I could make the artwork. So anyway, that being said, is psychedelic prayer rugs is a mind thought. If I'm looking at this found object, which is a prayer rug, I want to fashion it within my own lived experience. And so I was thinking about protest posters where people are demonstrating and protesting the sovereignty of their own bodies. So you have, ACT UP, this is a terrible image, sorry. You have like the ACT UP Grand Fury poster graphics world that you see on the right. This is this is like a comfortable space where people could grab a book and read and learn more about the protest posters. If they wanted to either empathize or emulate to see what it felt like to be in the bowing state, I thought that this was like a really interesting opportunity to do so, because I don't think like you could just walk into someone's holy space and not being native to that holy space and be like, hey, I want to know what this feels like. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting as a point of dialogue to open up a space for healing, for bridging, for getting people to understand what it's like to be in each other's spaces and philosophies and body positionalities.
Baseera, question, if it's okay for me to ask.
Everyone should interrupt me because I'm just like a workhorse and I will talk all through the night. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking about how do you signal people that they are invited to bow, to kneel and touch their foreheads to the floor in the ritualistic motion of Islamic prayer in an era of cultural appropriation, where cultural appropriation is so triggering, right?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think Mark, you asked that question. It's such a good question because the only way that I can respond is through a call to action. So in a museum space, in a gallery space, or in a classroom, you have certain allotted moments that kind of create the plan and the platform. So you'll say like, there's a 30-minute introduction and then we'll break and we'll go into the first chapter, or something like there's a program. And so with each exhibition that I do, I try to figure out, do I want to activate my sculptures? I ask myself that question. Do I have the emotional capacity to do extra work here? And so if I feel like this is a good moment to do so, then I will physically be there, because these, after all, my responsibility. I bred these things into the world. So if someone has an issue with the way that these works are functioning, I want to be able to be there to speak up for these sculptures because they're in my care. So that's something that I do. Or if there's a group of people who are willing to be my agent or my proxy, they can speak up. So this is simply just programming. And when the programming hours are done, then the work presumes it's a code switch back to the kind of like static exhibition space. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So somehow during those programmed parts, visitors to the space are invited to participate?
Yes.
And this is a participant ink appropriately, right?
This one is at Participant Inc., yes.
Yeah.
But this one was in Katona and I was not able to travel out there. And so what I did was I created a marble plinth. And around the backside of this plinth is a space where people had to take their shoes off and put little booties on. Or if they wanted to slip their booties over the shoes, because there was a full-time attendant at this exhibition. And so because I wasn't able to be there all the time, and people would come through sometimes from like different parts of, that regional area, I wanted people to feel like they could come up to the plinth and stand or sit on the carpet. Another thing that one could do if they desire to try to figure out a nomenclature around the use value of their sculptures, if they're interested in performance and the merging of performance and sculpture, is just have an exhibition copy. If you know in the future you're going to work in iterations, you're going to work with performance, then there can just be like a performance suit that can be touched, that can be moved around, that can be situated in ways that are untraditional to the confines of the art market and like preservation. Are we ready?
I'm sorry, I have a question. I was wondering if you ever had any interaction with someone who does these prayers like on a daily basis, who's religious, and how they felt about it, or if they had any thoughts on it, because I feel like in like some religions or in some cultures, like acts of praying and like the rituals of praying could be in a way like fetishized or like to some extreme commodified in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I grew up in Islam, and you know, in all intents and purposes and practicing, I would call myself more a secular person, because within hierarchical spaces, you always, like religion or institutions, you always have, it permeates, you know, patriarchy. It permeates. There's a lot of like issues around not giving sovereignty over femme or non-binary bodies. So, you know, I proceed with caution in these spaces. But to just like answer the question directly, this particular show here at Katona, there's a huge Muslim population that actually supports this museum space. And this was a part of an Islamic touring show. And so I think that that's the reason why I wanted people to feel if they wanted to feel. If this was just like me at the Brooklyn Museum showing this work out of context, from that particular educational opportunity, then I would have just let it be static sculptural objects in the room and no one was able to touch it. So those are some questions that I just asked myself. I try to be as ethical as possible when I'm making this work. Now to answer the question directly about appropriation or fetishization, never gonna get that word right, fetishization. Now, the Islam that I was brought up in is all about opening it up to the public. It's about like interfaith. It's about allowing anyone who's curious to get your feet wet. And so the mosque that my family helped build in Texas had people from different mind thoughts and places that were just curious about getting to know their neighbors, getting to know us. And sometimes that brought us fortune and sometimes that didn't. And this is just something that I was raised to believe, is that you have to have an open thought and that anyone can enter, anyone can like be a part of it and anyone can join. And there's no like real ritual into entering this philosophy and this way of life. It's just intent. Like if your intent is to destroy, then your intent is to destroy. But if your intent is curious, like you want to build bridges, then you're always welcome. And there's no scrutiny there. There's no fetishization, because this is all about building bridges. And that's, I have to say, that's one thing that is actually cloaked in American politics, is that we kind of think that because a lot of minorities are seen, or because like Islam is seen as a minority religion, a religion that is like primarily Black and brown, or Asian, a religion that is, you know, it's seen as only that resides in the ghettos, because ghettos are the way that neighborhoods are built up to like facilitate immigrant populations, right? That's kind of the origin. Well, there's a deeper origin to that word. I won't go there. But so what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of cloaking that goes on and othering that goes on to create Islamophobia. And one of the things that has unfortunately happened is that, you know, Islam is seen as a religion that incites violence, which doesn't allow for other people to come in and enter in. Is just definitely not true. And though you do have bad actors everywhere, it's not the tenets of the actual religion itself.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving forward, so Braid Rage. Braid Rage is a endurance performance where I was looking at materials that I like to wear, which is jewelry, gold, but thinking of it from more a historical perspective in terms of ownership and sovereignty. I learned how to climb myself basically through Brooklyn boulders or any of these other like indoor rock climbing gyms, and developed the strength to be able to climb myself. So I used resin materials. I embedded those resin materials with hypothermia blankets, hair, and wearable chains. Here's a great example of seeing all those materials. And another example. You can really see that that's my back, right? And all of those bumps are actually goosebumps because it was so cold when we did the dragon skin resin removal. This is a location in which took on the installation that I was able to perform at. This was in 2019, and currently this work is, there's a film that I made during COVID that is now on display at the New Orleans Museum of Art. So if any of you have family members or any of you are actually there, how do I know? I haven't met all of you. You can go and see that film at the space. This is at the Albany Museum, which is a part of the university in Albany. And this is actually at NOMA. This is at the New Orleans Museum of Art. So this is the sculptures that are extended from the ceiling that look like clouds is someone else's work. And this is just a vantage point looking into my video. Close-up shots. So me trying to climb the wall is kind of the big idea, and just leaving a trace of how far up I got or how where I was able to create this drawing. And this is the first time that I did it, and this was the night of 2017, February 26th. And this right here in the corner right here with the glasses, that's Leah Gagetano, the person that enabled me to do this work and that hosts this show, this space. So I may be working on showing this film at the Brooklyn Museum for that show down the line, which I'm very excited about, and extending the project with another body endurance project that will potentially remove my hair as of, and creating a braid out of that, and just sort of transforming my look. And hair for me is a really important political tool that I would like to open up a discussion about wherever I go with whatever I make. And this actually is a performance that I did in Italy. So right here. So this is a small arts organization in Italy that invited me to recreate Braid Rage, but I ended up having to make the molds there in Italy because we couldn't ship the work. And so what I ended up doing was working with this group of students that you see who have all ropes that are harnessing me, and I did corners of their body. So I enabled them to control where I walked, where I climbed on the wall, because I'm climbing their body parts. And so I thought that that was a good rule, and this was the end result.
Sarah, students are curious, posting in the chat how you
Yep.
mounted the holds on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Well, firstly, I want to say that I went to Italy and I was able to make pasta sculptures. And I just thought that was amazing because, you know, as before, it was like I'm in my studio, I got to use all kinds of materials. I use resin. Here I'm in Italy, I don't have the same budget, and I also don't have the same materials. So we made pasta molds. Pastry molds. And then let's see, do I have an image of the, Okay, I don't. But it's pretty easy in this instance. We cut a hole straight through the molds. So that's pretty easy. But on the ones where we're here, we actually had to work with an engineer. We had to work with an engineer that's made climbing walls before, and we found a way to burrow behind the resin material and put in a fixture that then we like twisted it onto the wall. This is a great example of also, to get to your student's question, a lot of the work that happens with Braid Rage happens on the floor. So this is an image of me arranging it on these 8x4 sheets of MDO. And then it gets lifted and hoisted up onto the wall. Does this make sense? Okay, so next work. I call these seats. And one of the seats are behind me right now in my Zoom. Seats. These are my family members and the way I kind of grew up within this panel on panel space. Lots of ornamentation everywhere. My mom at Urban Outfitters a couple of years ago, just chilling, having good vibes. And thinking about all that history and all that material, and then fashioning my own room. And it was a karaoke room. So I called this Karaoke Spiritual Center of Love. And I used all the ephemera material of my life that I carry with me from place to place. And it's pretty oppressive to have to carry all that material, like, you know, prayer rugs and like clothing, traditional clothing I'll never wear. And so instead of throwing them out or giving them away, or even at times selling it, I decided to transform that material and turn them into these covers of these seats, sometimes in humorous ways and sometimes in ornamental ways. Using my underwear, using prayer rugs, but mass-produced prayer rugs, and, you know, hijabs, clothing, pants, you know, whatever I could get my hands on, I would make these covers. And then the transition from this room, this karaoke room, after this exhibition, I decided I'm going to pull the tops off. These glowing seats are actually cabinets where music would come out of. So when you sat down on them, you kind of like your butt kind of twitched because you were listening to the music that came out of these TVs, so you could sing along with them, right? And so then once that show happened, that safe space ended. So I wasn't going to be able to recreate this in quite the same way. So I decided to take the tops off the speaker cabinets and place them on the wall. And so now these sculptures are having a kind of legacy of painting in terms of the conversation that we're having. And I love that transition and that positionality. Because the one theme that I keep trying to harp on is my body and my body positionality. And so now we're talking about the gaze. We're talking about, okay, these seats are supposed to make you feel comfortable, but now I'm standing here being denied comfort. But, you know, now I'm looking at this work in a different way. And this is the work that's right behind me right now. Close-ups. And this is so a new set of works that was at the Jenkins Johnson show that kind of like really hones in on specific kinds of silhouettes, whereas these were kind of like amorphous body parts. These were specifically headdresses of different people that just covered their head. It didn't matter what religion or race or gender or age. I just was looking at the silhouettes of people's heads and how they cover their hair, and I would take that silhouette and I would cut it out on wood, and I would just make a seat out of that. That was specifically for the wall. That's unfortunately the only example I have of the newer works of the seat series, and that's my bad. That's like me just not giving you enough in this space. This what do you call this, PowerPoint? Okay, so privacy control. I'm going to be working with privacy control for the Brooklyn Museum show. And so it started out with a feeling. Here, this is the mosque that my family helped build in Denton, Texas. And I was just sitting there with my niece. This is me right here. And I was sitting there with my niece. No, that's not me. I can't see me yet. Anyway, I was just sitting there with my family, and I was looking through this double-sided material, this glass. They can't, the men can't see me, but I can see them, right? But I can also see all these other things. I can see myself, I can see behind me, I can see this please quiet sign. And I was just like, wow, like if 1.6 billion Muslims that reside in this world, let's just take half those people and say that they're femme and they're experiencing the same vision that I'm experiencing. That is like worth investigating. The material and the whole like feeling of that is worth investigating. And so I went around the city and noticed the material everywhere because it's on every building everywhere, right? And so I got my hands on the material. These are 4x8 sheets. And I was thinking about the scaffolding and so and the space between the scaffolding and the actual building. And I built out this sculpture called Privacy Control. And there's text behind it. And that text is me translating the last chapters of the Quran in a feminist spin, with a feminist spin. So this work will arrive at the Brooklyn Museum for me to create a new iteration of what it will look like. This one's at Brick. This one was at Simone Subal Gallery in the Lower East Side. And this one is at Brick, which is a nonprofit space in downtown Brooklyn. And I do oftentimes perform behind them where I climb and scale the entirety of the piece, oftentimes with a bike light or a headlight. Therefore I'm able to reveal different parts of the words. And I like the idea of surveillance and thinking about how that translation's hidden behind this two-sided material. And if you can move your body around, you might be able to see certain words and not certain words. But then, most of the time it's just you looking at yourself and maybe even taking a selfie because you like the way you look or something. And I like that duality. Okay, we're moving on to another work, and then we're gonna kind of quickly get through this so I can share some other stuff in here from you. So I call this, the archival collages for me is like a space where I can just like cut all the noise, not even have to talk to fabricators, not even have to, even sometimes get out of bed because I'm just kind of thinking about all the materials I have and arranging them and collaging them. And then I can then take them to a framer or, whomever to then like assemble for me. So again, I'm like looking at all this ephemera from my past. These are notes that my father took to try to keep track of the people who are getting born or dying. This is like records that my family brought over when they initially came to the United States in the 70s. This is like just like a ephemera that shows that my father actually was a part of a company of about 30 some odd people, male and female, that started the first native college in Bangalore, India, called Al-Amin College, that has now been absorbed by the university, Bangalore University. This was a signia that was given to him because he was the chemistry professor. And so his initials is NSK. And so I'm taking NSK to make a new work for the Brooklyn Museum show, so stay tuned. This is a performance that I did through the ephemera to talk about surveillance in an airport. I'm not going to show the video from that, but maybe I'll release it at some point. And this is a boat that's carrying a lot of people that are coming from one space to the other. I think we are all familiar with this. If we're not familiar with this image, then we can address that in questions. But I took the silhouette of that and I started to cut them out and create a space or a portal or transitional space between my archives and that cutout. So this is the way I'm telling you about, you know, being at home, being in a safe environment that's away from the noise, and just kind of handling materials, cutting things out, pasting things, covering things up, coloring over things, you know, whatever I could do to get my point across, I would do. And I have tons of these. These are just a few. Getting back into painting, I used to paint, and getting back into painting through like laying down panes of glass that are different colors, plexiglass. And then in Snakeskin, which is this work that happened in November 2019, I was looking at forms of power. So I settled on the Corinthian column. And you know, the right and the left side of these are in Italy, and you're seeing the image on the right side is in agrarian space right outside of Rome. And I was just like kind of fascinated with this ruin, and it's this ruin of time, this thing that adorns all of our banks, all of our municipalities, these Corinthian columns. And so I took that and I decided to also dive into my own personal memories to kind of complicate the narrative of this Corinthian column, and noticed on the outside of these windows there's a bank. This is Simone Subal Gallery. If you look out this window, the last window on the right, you can actually see one of those Corinthian columns on the bank there, which I thought was hilarical. And so you know, I draft these kind of goofy Photoshop images to kind of start thinking about ideas. And then I also just look into my own life. The image on the left is the Malcolm X Shabazz Mosque in Harlem. And you know, this is not akin to just the space, but most of these prayer spaces are sprawling. They make you try to remember what it's like to be outside in the wild. And oftentimes you'll see columns because they're sprawling spaces, and the columns are there to support the ceiling from falling in. And so sometimes people just like wrap the columns with the prayer rug to kind of camouflage that the columns exist, which I think is kind of a hilarical aesthetic move on the parts of our aunties and uncles that are like adorning these spaces. And so I wanted to kind of think that through, that aesthetic move, and make my own Corinthian column. I hollowed out the center with these resin caps, so you can actually shine light through it and you can see color. And they're made out of foam, architectural foam. So these Corinthian columns, which are very heavy, right? I mean, they through the test of time, and look how big they are. They're the size of this person. And now this continues to be that size. It's the same size. It's like 6 by 6 feet. And it's light. I can pick it up by myself. It's about 40 to 50 pounds. And it's covered with Kashmiri rugs. These are the rugs that we had to smuggle out from Kashmir, bring it to Kochi, and then mail it over. And the shapes were all made through historical shapes and patterns, but that we all got together, Kashmiri rug makers and I got together to determine the different designs and patterns, and they embroidered them for me out of silk and sent them to me, and I found a way to then apply them to this foam material. So there's a lot of material research in my practice, which may or may not be relevant. Well, it may or not be relevant, but it also may not have shown up quite the way that I set up this PowerPoint presentation. Because I'm talking again a lot about my body and its position and politics and all this noise around me when I'm making. And here's a good example. This is at Simone Subal. Here's a good example of the way that the light plays with the center of these columns. You can see the light spilling onto the floor. I thought it was important to make sure that the center of the column was hollow, because the center of these spaces of power, these Corinthian columns, are solid. It's a solid metal or solid cement pole that then these Corinthian kind of bangles get fashioned on top of, so, and stacked on top of. So thought it'd be nice to gut out the columns and wrap them with this political material in a way, like this subversive material, these Kashmiri rugs, these graphics, and to hug the Corinthian columns so hard that it started to crack. So that's the big idea. Maybe it's cheesy, I don't care. And to couple that, I decided to also continue that research and look into architecture and look into this GDR comic book called Mosaic that was about rug making in and around the time of communist Germany, essentially, or I don't even know what to call it, but it was like when East Germany was propagating socialism through these comic books against the kind of capitalist or whatever West Germany situation. And so I created a series to go along with the snakeskin columns, and I called these the snakeskin collages. And these are the Mosaic magazines and some of the collages that I was able to make through them. Each one of these collages are I make the frames myself, and so I'm able to make custom spacers that have the prayer rugs on top of them. This is a scene of the sky from the northeast point. I thought that would just be tongue-in-cheek thing to do. And then the scratch outs are spaces of censorship. So you know how when you're a kid and you're in bed and you're looking at People's Magazine, which maybe some of you don't know what it is, but it's just like kind of the Facebook of the 80s. And you would just like get a pen and scratch things out and censor things. That's that kind of like aesthetic quality of wanting to scratch out the problem is what I ended up doing with some of the comic books. And then I took that as a pattern to apply it to places. I do this thing called what I call cameraless photography, which technically it's not cameraless because there's a photo, but I arrange and perform under a scanner so that you can see my body pressed up against two materials. And so here you can see the way that the skin on my hand is pressing up against the glass when the photo is being taken, and it's getting smushed around. So new work, this is me asleep. This is where I do a lot of my work. I think a lot of people know what it's like to be asleep. I feel like during this last year, a lot of people had a lot of their lives in bed. And so I was able to make this new body of work called By Faith, according to the shapes of me sleeping in bed. And each one of these pieces, I'll show you more pieces after I get off this PowerPoint. Each one of these pieces has a ring light, a selfie light behind it, illuminating a part of the sculpture, and a microphone stand that's creating body and creating body. And I'll show you more of those. And then this is another body of work that I just completed. And these are the graphics that I made for the works, and they just got framed. So I have kind of like crappy images to share with you of these works, but I just wanted to show this graphic real quick because it's easy. This is me doing a full body scan of my body instead of just the hands in the scanner. And this is another group of things I will share with you, which is By Faith, the TV show that these screens come from. I pulled them off of the frame right here, and I made the work. And this is the experimental TV show that I shot at the Kitchen collab that I can share a few videos with you. Okay, solo show is where I'm going. This is the room that I am going to occupy. And in the center is the Judy Chicago dinner room. And so this is a traditional kind of hallway where I get to show work. But then in these triangles is where I'm going to facilitate some of the older works. And so, this is like the way I wanted to share this with you because you are a group of students. You probably all are like total badasses and, will far supersede anything that I will ever do in my lifetime. I'm hoping that happens. And so I just wanted to share this floor plan with you. It's unprecedented to show it, but I just wanted to let you know that, this is kind of the beginning stages of thinking through what is that Brooklyn Museum show going to look like. Okay, So I'm going to exit out of here and just field questions while I show you these works, okay? So I did a lot for you, so please return the favor by asking me questions and stuff, please.
Is it okay to ask a question now?
Yeah.
Right now? Okay. Yeah, thank you for showing everything. And I see you do a lot of kind of site-specific and large-scale installs. I wonder, like, at the beginning of your career, like even earlier works are all involving the whole environment and involving the body and some programming with it. Do you approach these projects with like a proposal, a full-on plan proposal of everything? Or yeah, I just wonder how you get started on those.
Well, at the beginning of my practice, I think what I did was I was applying to grants and trying to acquire and accrue the finances to do so. And so that actually was giving me, even though like a lot of the times I was rejected, what that was doing was it was putting me on this track as an artist to pitch my work, you know, the unknown work to a public. So it was enabling me to, you know, make drawings, make graphics, and write narratives to enable somebody to see what I see. So in a way, I did share some of those archival images and sketches with you. And I think that that's an example. So for example, when I showed this floor plan to you, you know, this object right here, let me see if I can, this is a proposal for a new work right here. So, so I'm looking at South Asian busts of like goddesses and gods, whatever. And I want to superimpose my own body onto it. So I want to do a mold of my body and remove my actual hair that I have right now and fasten it onto the sculpture. And I want to make I want to make the whole sculpture out of charcoal. So, and do drawings with it. So this is just a way for me to start having that conversation with not only myself, but with the people who would then be responsible for finding that money. So this is another example. And I think that in the deck that I just shared with you guys, you saw that these performance images are from back in the day when I was actually working out the Braid Rage wall, right?
Yeah.
And so I just took those and appropriated them onto these figures, these this archival bust from the Met Museum. So that's so you're right. So I have to do a lot of chuck and jiving, like a lot of tap dancing to get people to open up and let me do the work that I need to do.
Gotcha. Can you tell us a little bit about the charcoal? Because I remember in the braid piece, you were kind of smearing that around your face and your body, and I don't think you touched on that.
Yeah, it's you know, like I can let's just say, I'm just afraid of overwhelming and outputting too much information. So I'll just kind of like try to stick to a theme. I don't even know if I was successful at that tonight, but so I could take Braid Rage and just like create a whole hour and a half just concentrating on Braid Rage and pulling it apart. So when I initially was thinking about doing Braid Rage, I kind of wanted access to water, and I wasn't able to access water at the time. And so what we ended up doing was facilitating, instead of with ink, facilitating what I wanted to do with tracing the wall with chalk. And so in the spaces of climbing itself within indoor rock climbing spaces, they actually do have chalk everywhere, so they can put it on your hands to make your hands dry so that you can grip better. And so I translated that actual act of rock climbing into my own aesthetics, which is doing a drawing and becoming a drawing instrument. And so I used charcoal, this black charcoal, and then smeared it all over my body to then create a trace onto the wall. Another thing that I did was I tried to prepare myself to climb. And so in order to do that, I took the charcoal and kind of performed this kind of meditation that you do before you pray. It's called wazoo or wadu. And so I went through the motions of doing that in order to apply that material onto me. And in places in the world where you don't have water, you can perform that meditation with dirt. And so that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to play with that material.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. These are like what you're looking at right now is just like brand spanking new work. I haven't even gotten to see it yet from the framers. I'm just looking at these kind of crappy images of the photos taken on their phone. Everything's super reflective because the reflections are so, because Plexi's so reflective, right? Oh, and this is nice because this is the way that I got my fabricators to figure out what size and what work that each one of these plexi pieces were supposed to be adhered to. So for example, that piece was for this pink line right here. Yep. Okay. If you guys don't have any more questions, I can share some by faith stuff.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing all of this. Your work is really incredible.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So I kind of am doing the reverse of what you were saying. I know you mentioned earlier that you used to paint a lot, and then from that, you kind of started building this familial archive and like collecting. And I kind of started off, I'm a first year student, and I kind of started off this semester doing the opposite and kind of collecting photos and pieces from both sides of my family roots, and then using that as like a form of a base inspiration to kind of paint from. So I was just curious with like, since you have such a large range of like installation, collage, performance, sculpture, do you ever feel it's difficult or like get overwhelmed in terms of working from medium to medium since you have like such a range?
I think I experienced a lot of fatigue and frustration for the first few years.
Okay.
Because I was trying to build a foundation. So you're going to experience, I would say approximately for the next 5 years, you're going to be like really tired because you're going to be doing a whole lot more than other people in the room are doing. Because sometimes you can work from a legacy that exists already. For example, you know, I could refer to Senegalese painting or, you know, Pakistani miniature painting, or, you know, there's legacies that I could have followed that would have enabled me to dig deeper and add on to those languages. But instead I was like, you know what? I don't know those places. Like my family made a series of choices, and then there was a series of political warfare that led me to a place where I don't know where I came from. I have no access to these places. All I know is that I like Nike shoes, and I'm a material girl, and I like, you know, watching TV and like hanging out with my friends and eating pizza or whatever. That's a bad example of what I like to do. But all I'm trying to say is I'm like kind of native to the space in which I was raised. And so I wanted to share the aesthetics of that with the inherent historical stuff that I come from. And so what I made the decision to essentially create my own legacy, which is why I started this project with you guys with this PowerPoint. I started off with stating my terms in my own poetic way. But I'm very proud of my armchair cannon sculpture thing that I made. It's not a sculpture, it's a collage. I was very proud of myself for doing that, making that. But does that make sense? Like you're just like, you just need to get it straight in your head. You need to have a lot of intent. You need to know who you are, because that's what it takes to do anything, whether you want to be a lawyer or a surgeon, or you want to be a political activist, or like a musician or comedian. Like the world's always going to kind of be skeptical at first because we don't know what's in your head. And so after a while, you know, you don't even need to speak because a lot of this work is just doing the work for you. For example, when I was talking about making that Nike shoe, I mean, now that the shoe was stolen and then brought back, and then I had to sit down with the DA's office and all this stuff, like a lot of that stuff just happened, and now it's a part of the shoe, and everybody knows that, and it's a public record. And so there's a lot that I don't even have to do with that shoe anymore. It ages like fine wine.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Good night. I heard you mention about seats, like you made seats from the headdress silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was interested in the idea of the seat or the head as a kind of seat. Because, you know, in Eastern cultures, the head is the house of the soul. Mm-hmm. So I was interested in that kind of, how did you link the headdress to a seat or a why, you know, and also the plexiglass, the plexi material. You seem to use it, like this transparent material. It's in the columns, or a kind of transparent or translucent kind of material, shining light. What's the relevance of that? Mm-hmm. So 2 questions, I guess it's 2 parts.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I want to answer both of those questions with the theme that I had that year, which was protection. So I was thinking about that as an overarching theme. And I think that, like, it's not really done in the contemporary art world, but it's done in fashion. So in the fashion industry, you always come up with a fall theme or a spring theme, and you have these kind of quarterly themes that you work upon. And so I was like, you know what, let me take some of that and create that into my own space, because as the student that asked the question before you, I'm trying to do a lot. So I'm trying to create my own rules and regulations. Otherwise, like, where do I start? Like, I could use any material in any form of art making. So protection. That's why I use privacy control, because the material itself is called privacy control. I didn't make that name up. I bought the film to attach to a window, and on the box it says privacy control. You can buy it at Home Depot. All of you can go out tomorrow and buy it at Home Depot. So that became the way that I started navigating that two-way mirror, which is actually used in surveillance. It's used to protect one's privacy. It's used for all kinds of things. Mirrors. The head cover. So in a lot of cultures, and these are tons of different cultures, tons of different manifestations of religious thought, both male, female, and non-binary, you have the dome is the place in which you kind of like can experience a lot of portals and a lot of transitions. And so sometimes people cover that to protect themselves. And sometimes you don't want someone to touch that, because that could transfer energy. And so I was thinking about, again, modes of protection, both within my own, lived experience and cultures, but then also was trying to like lighten it up and make it about everybody, or all these different cultures, because I think it's very fascinating that like different geographies and different cultures kind of hold some of the same sentiments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that being said, I think that let me just get through some of the TV journaling, and then I won't interject. We can just do Q&A until we're done with the class. So By Faith, it's a TV show footaging that I've been working on, that you saw images of, the space in which we produced, and it culminates from tableaus of my house, which come from those sculptures that you saw that were on the wall. And here is just anyone can access this link. You just need to go to the kitchen, and then you'll go to the online screening, and then it drops down to all these different places, and then you'll see Baseera Khan. So here's a rough cut or two, and I want to share with you something that's punchy and fun to watch. Let's watch the scene. So this is a scene where I'm trying to explain to my friend Rico that like something really magical happened in my house, and that I've always been dealing with a spirit that's in the house. And actually the word by faith is actually listed above my doorway in my apartment in Brooklyn, because there was a spiritualist that lived here before me. And so over the course of the 10 years that I've lived in this apartment, I've had to like on some level like navigate around that energy. And so now that I've been basically housed and complacent in my apartment this whole year, I really was like, I need to bunker down and really try to figure out how to navigate this energy. And so what happened right before the lockdown in March was my bookshelf completely fell down during a kind of like small dinner party that I threw at my house, because I thought that it would be a good idea to not go out to a restaurant, because that would be dangerous because of COVID. So I was like, oh, I need to have this dinner party to invite a couple of curators over to have this discussion about a project. So I'll just make dinner and have them come over here. And so there was like about 4 or 5 people in the house. We're having dinner, and then all the books come crashing down right when we start talking about how like it's impossible that there'll be a quarantine. It's impossible how the global market will shut down. We went down the line of all the things that are obviously now we know is possible. So this is a reenactment of that moment.
And all of a sudden, all the books came crashing down. It was just like, it was almost like, it's like, take these books, throw them on the ground.
Just throw these. You just want me to throw these books on the ground.
On the ground. That's how loud it was. I mean, it was like, it was more. Let me throw this. It was like.
Here. Maybe it was even louder than that.
Okay, you want to try it again? It was like.
Perhaps
rental.
For extra effect. This is by Biden.
Oh yeah. Screw you, Biden. Screw you. I can't read Farsi.
Yeah, so all the books fell down.
Screw you, Thames in Houston. Hudson. Yale. Okay. You want to throw this one?
No, you throw it. Through you, black and white checkered concrete cover.
You just said through you.
Oh, screw you.
Don't throw the ball. Okay.
Okay. So that's what happened.
That's what happened.
The books fell down.
So I know that that's disjointed and there's no way you can really tell what's happening within the whole frame of reference with the TV show, but like it's a moment where the whole show is about me having a fever dream and I'm in my bed, and I'm assuming that all this stuff is happening. And so I chose to use these flat sheets that describe parts of my apartment, because when I have dreams, sometimes things become like spaces become conflated and then I'm in multiple spaces at the same time. So I was just trying to figure out a way to recreate that within this cinematic form. Like at times there's just going to be this weird stilted conversation that happens, and then you'll catch me back in my bed and you can see that I have a fever. There's like lots of different stuff, and right now in the next I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see you guys, and in the next couple of weeks and the next month and a half, I'm going to be working at a film residency at the Wexner Center, where I'm doing a remote residency to facilitate this about 40-minute pilot of By Faith. And so right now we're actually just trying to narrativize. We're trying to scrub through all the material, make video notes, and start to piece together a narrative that makes sense. The overall narrative is, I'm at a point in my life where I was really trying to think through my issues of intimacy. And then therefore, because of that move, the funny part of the life is that the minute I finally had the guts to think through my intimacy issues, COVID happens. And so it changes the dynamics and the technology of even being able to do something about thinking through intimacy. So, you know, intimacy is a pretty universal feeling. It's a trans species feeling, like plants have their own senses of intimacy. So I figured that that would be a broad enough topic for everyone to get into. Should I go get my nail file? Was there anything that I had said before that maybe you guys jotted down in terms of, you know, a way to critique me, or a way to question me, a way to compliment me, a way to transgress something you're working on?
Yeah, I found your work very powerful, and I felt like how you started this presentation with like canon and canon, like it really like spoke to me, and I see like your use of language and just working through origins a lot through your work. I wanted to ask Mark, in your introduction at some point mentioned that you were, I think, I'm not sure if it was for a residency in Ramallah in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask, what was your experience there? Because I see also Kashmir is like a place that is kind of like in like kind of parallel with Palestine in terms of like being in between two places, or like not having a.
They both had British mandates. They both
Right.
they both went to partitions. They both went through partitions. No, I feel you. So that happened in 2015. And I was there for about a month and a half. It was really like a research fellowship. So I wasn't there to make artwork. I was there to kind of like get into the scene and feel my way out. It was awkward because I kind of had to make it my own thing. And so I did a lot of walking, and I talked to a lot of young girls that were entering the military. And that's kind of where I ended up having most of my fun and like sharing intimate stories and, you know, whatever. That's kind of what I got out of it, both in Ramallah and in Jerusalem. It was a really mind-opening experience because I never quite feel like I'm seen as an American here in the United States, but definitely whenever I travel anywhere, I not only see myself as an American, but I'm clearly seen as an American. After I open my mouth, right? It's like before I open my mouth, I could be from anywhere, but the minute I open my mouth, my accent describes me. So there's so much I could say about my experience there. I felt like I was surveilled, but for a lot of reasons. I feel like one of the things that I want to expand upon when I'm thinking about surveillance is how we surveil ourselves, and how we surveil our own communities, and how we accidentally other our own people within our own communities. And so that was a place where I really started to actually see that, because it wasn't about me. It was like I was just seeing like all these different factions and philosophies of, you know, Jewish people having arguments within themselves, and then Muslims having arguments within themselves, and then Orthodox having arguments with themselves. And like it was like a buffet that you went to, and there was a lot of food there, and you couldn't figure out what food to eat because there was just too much food there. And so you end up overeating and then vomiting. Like that's kind of what it felt like to me to be there. But it was like just like a most transformative moment for me, because that's when I started to really open up, I guess you could say, my third eye into the space where I was like becoming more critical of my own relationship to my religion, to my family structure, to my gender, to all of this. And yes, like I had been doing that work before, but I really, really was able to do that starting from 2015, which enabled me to do all the work that I'm doing since.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so traveling was really good for me. What you got?
Hi.
What are some of these background images? Hello.
Hi. I don't have exactly a question, but I really enjoyed all of your work. I've been climbing for 13 years, and I've never seen anyone like re-envision that like sport and like those spaces in such a like visceral, like poetic way before. Like I've never seen anything like that. I'm really curious, like everything, even like that like connection between like charcoal and chalk. Like I didn't even think about that, and I'm like, I can't, like it's really it's like so clever. And I'm just curious if like you actually had any I don't know, experiences like climbing with other like climbers who might have like seen your work before, like what their reactions were like.
I was actually working, the person who initiated me into the climbing world was, she's a young, I believe Japanese person who was kind of, I think, in the process of writing a young adult novel about their lived experience of being a young prodigy climber. And so their name's Naomi. So, you know, that was the person who initiated me into the world. I think like these are clicks, right? You know, clicks is a different, I understand clicks, because what I was trying to explain before about my experience in Ramallah and Jerusalem was like, I started to understand the othering within groups that are supposed to be like safe communities. And then I realized like, oh, clicks within clicks. And so I kind of really understood that that was just another space I wanted to occupy and kind of unpack. And that's what led me into it, right? I mean, where most of the work I do, I'm just kind of chilling in the cut. Like I'm not intending on making work while I'm like at the mosque on a Friday, bored to death, looking at Facebook. Like I don't intend to make work there. I just sort of looked up one day and was like, oh, this is interesting. Let me make something out of this. Then with the climbing, there was a lot going on in my life that I needed to unpack in constructive ways. So I started exercising, and the exercising led to rock climbing, and I like the decision making of it. Where do I move my body? How do I counteract my body, and the endurance of it really set my mind straight. It was doing more for me to do that than to go to psychology appointments or whatever. And so then one day when I was climbing, I realized like, oh, there's a lot of gender dynamics and a lot of like competition and a lot of like within this clique of rock climbing in New York, it's kind of personifying America in a way. And so I wanted to kind of think that through and make Braid Rage.
Sarah, there's a question in the chat, but
I heard an interview with you and Jasmine. In the interview, you mentioned pulling and pushing from personal experience as a form of material, and that you wish to build your own legacy. My question was if you thought it was a good idea to search for experiences and somehow use those to influence your work. Random example is learning underwater welding, and later this experience could come out. Oh, so yeah, so that's, I feel like the thing that I just said about rock climbing is that. So I feel like that might have wrapped up that question.
Alex, you totally have to do underwater welding art.
Yes, please do that, whoever you are. Alex.
Baseera, do you know the mosque on 29th Street between Broadway and 5th? On the north side of the street, opposite the Ace Hotel?
No,
It's
I don't.
It's kind of an amazing scene. especially of course on Friday afternoons. I recommend you check it out.
Unfortunately, I know the Ace Hotel. That's why.
Yeah, the Ace Hotel is a bummer, but across the street is this wonderful mosque with two, Pakistani restaurants above it, and
Oh, okay. I know
just a
those.
really big, diverse community of people that come and gather and hang out on the street and sell things on the street, and it's quite a scene.
Okay, cool. Thank you
There,
for
right
pointing that
opposite
out.
the Uber hailing Ace Hotel folks.
Thanks for pointing that out because I'm working on a public project with the Public Art Fund. It's like a large sculpture, and I'm doing some research on color theory and how color can be used in terms of creating economic value. And so if any of you have been doing that work or thinking through some of that, I'm happy to talk to you. But so I'm thinking through color therapy theory, that kind of thing. And then I'm making these light sculptures that anyone can go to. And a part of that is creating a new set of rugs. And so those rugs will live in temples, mosques, churches, and they will be used by the native people that come into those spaces, that use those spaces. And the only way that the art world will be able to engage with that work and see that work is if they are invited into those spaces. So again, it's me forcing people outside of their comfort zones and going into these spaces to witness something that they would like to assume is happening.
There's a student in this program. She's on leave right now, but she'll be back in the fall. She's done work with color therapy and spirituality and stuff. Aya has her contact info in case you want to be in touch.
Great, that'd be cool. Thank you. And thanks for telling me about that space across from the Ace Hotel, the mosque.
They're in the process of building a new one, I think, but I think the old one is still open. It was like in the basement.
I mean, I could read these other messages. There's a lot going on here on the chats. I personally think that regarding an invite-only group as future is a bit elitism. Maybe some of the stuff is not in regards to me.
Oh, that was about that that new social app that you mentioned at the start.
Okay, so let's. I mean, do you want me to go there, or do you want me to?
Oh, I don't know. You don't have to. That was just like, I think my sense is you were interested in the way that it worked, not its invite only.
Oh yeah, and I don't think that this app has any intention of staying private. I think that they invited a select group of people in the entertainment and IT world to get it popping. And then, I mean, I'm not special. I just got an invite, recently because it's becoming bigger. And with it becoming bigger, there's more bugs to handle. And then once they get the product right, they're going to make it public, and there's not going to be, that's kind of how Facebook worked, if you all remember. It's just a way to make a product, and sometimes these social technological tools require a lot of foresight. But I believe you, and I agree with you. I think classism is a problem. Elitism is a part of classism. Somebody said good night, everybody. I'm like, okay.
No, that was Xavier saying hello.
Okay.
We have the link until now.
Good night, everybody.
Our friend in Spanish Town.
Okay, let's see. I have been thinking about hair a lot as well. How it censors and suppresses sexuality. So yeah, the newer work that I'm interested in is I'll be removing all of my hair, and then kind of getting into a discourse about the distribution of my virgin Indian hair, and how it not to point fingers at like Indians or people who attach that material into their hair, but I want to attack the issues of femininity itself and why we have gotten into a place within society where we're like moving ahead with a lot of issues around racism, but one thing that we seem to not tackle is issues of beauty and how that prevents women, specifically Black women, to like actually just kind of like break the mold of white supremacy. Because if you're constantly having to align yourself with a white woman, because if you don't wear the hair, then you're excluded, then how can we move forward? So I think like issues of beauty and femininity need to be met head on. And so because I am a biracial like woman of color, I kind of wanted to consider myself as an archive and use my own body. And at the Brooklyn Museum is asking me to go into their archives and create work that responds from those archives. Then I learned that they have South Asian and African remains in their archives. And so I thought, okay, well, if you want me to interact with your archives and make it okay for you to have this stuff, then I'll just hand over my own body parts.
I guess jumping off that point, I have a question on how you deal with performativity or performance and your own likeness, especially when sometimes different bodies are seen as like a heavier reference, I suppose, and navigating that, especially with making objects. And it seems like a lot of your objects kind of have a larger than life feel, almost like, especially within the snakeskin installations. And I guess both personally, but also like display how you navigate that line.
How do I navigate subjectivity that's scrutinized and surveilled more than my body? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, kind of like pulling in between. I mean, yeah, navigating how. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so if we're talking about body subjectivity and the echelon or the totem pole of oppression, or whatever we're talking about, what I'm trying to do is facilitate my own lived experience and my own historical, body and issues. And I'm trying to think about the globe. I'm trying to think about global economy because, the way in which we can think about systems of hierarchy is all based on a capital return and what's people's bottom lines, what are corporations' bottom line, and the whole like human suffering that is happening in India around hair, like the humanitarian crisis of like children being cordoned into like little hovels and like their hair being ripped off their scalp and then being, shipped to China and then distributed in Korea into the heads of, and then braided into the heads of Kim Kardashian and like, like whomever else is putting natural hair extensions into their domes. Like this becomes an issue of economics. This becomes an issue of femininity. This becomes an issue of the subjectivity of a woman and what is being prescribed as objectification of beauty, of like what a body needs to look like in order to even be an entertainer. And a lot of times those bodies are within the entertainment field, within performance, those bodies are starting to emulate with the subject of hair. Let's stick to the subject of hair. It's an economy, and there are a lot of different bodies that have subjectivity to them. And I'm basically just looking at my life. I'm unpacking where I sit in that. And I'm also seeing the fact that I'm sitting here with like about $20,000 on my head. And I'm telling myself that I am ready to relinquish this in order to get to another place, another portal, a transition of myself. And so the other thing is I'm utilizing this hair to comment on like a museum asking me to come and do an exhibition and wash themselves of all the problems that they're having. Because the biggest problem that the Brooklyn Museum is having is that they are sitting on archives that do not belong to them. And so I'm basically going to try to use my own body to unpack that conversation and start to work from there. Like I'm not the answer. I'm not the person who can only dive into the politics of race examination and gender examination, because I do a lot of material diving as well. And so, I'm an artist, and so I'm sensitive and I'm open to discussion, and I'm also open to criticisms, and the work is only going to grow from there. I can't really worry about what anyone thinks. It's just that I'm trying to build a sense of intent for why I'm doing the things I'm doing, and then I'm moving forward.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, I know it seems like from what you're planning with this exhibition, you said that you're gonna like encase it in charcoal, but do you think that it's going to be used during this exhibition? Do you have like a further plan for what you want, like the way you want the hair to live after that? Like, do you plan on like preserving it or casting
Well,
it?
the funny thing about hair is it eventually kind of disintegrates over time. So I went through this transition when I was 19, and I kept my braid, and over time it just kind of ate itself within the package that I left it in. So I'm kind of thinking that the world will take care of itself, and so I'm just kind of trying to make the work now. The museum is thinking about acquiring the work, which would be the best thing for it, because then that kind of sits within the archive, and it creates a dialogue or a bridge. So there's like kind of like interesting curatorial conversations that can happen if that work then becomes acquired. The charcoal, the like body being burned, or me making a bust of my body and burning it, refers to like there's a lot of issues around ownership and owning bodies that are connected to capitalism, that I try to tease out in my work. And part of the reason why I think about protection is because I'm constantly trying to protect myself from being owned by the art world. And so, or being owned within my profession. And so, like there's these spiritual acts that women are asked to do, where when their husband dies, they're asked to throw themselves into a fire and burn themselves to end that cycle of their life. And so part of me making a bust of my body and then creating this instrument through embalming it is to kind of think through that aspect of ownership, and that aspect of like, what does it mean to come from a heritage of where you're born into the world just to be owned?
Into the silence, a question out of deep left field. Do you, unless Jody, unless you want to jump in now. I saw your camera come on. No?
I was thinking more about the topic of hair and beauty, and I'm not, like I've seen a number of performance artists perform with hair and cutting of the hair to reveal a new identity or whatever reason, basically as a response to the ideals of beauty. So, I mean, I think I've seen that in a number of places, but what I appreciate of the work you're doing from what I saw is when you were using resin to, I think I saw you had hair in the pieces of the resin. And I like that approach. But I guess I was also thinking about how natural hair and even artificial hair is being marketed to primarily African American women or women of African descent.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think that there is a movement right now anyway with Black women trying to just more embrace their natural hair anyway. So like, I don't know, I guess I was just like thinking about the relevance of that and where we are in terms of embracing our realness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like I was kind of deep diving into wigs, colonial wigs, and like, you know, colonial men covering the scabs in their head, and the lesions in their heads from like skin diseases. And so they would wear these wigs, and, you know, leprosy and things. And so I was translating that to why, you know, the Black body in America was seen as kept, it was seen as owned, it was seen as not human. And so it made so much sense to me to be like, oh, this kind of like American capitalism kind of was thwarted onto the female body. It was used to experiment with medicine and whatnot. And so the very thing that these like colonial men were covering, it was almost like projected onto the female body, because the female body had to emulate whiteness in order for it to be kept, in order for it to be unwild, right, or whatever. And so then I was kind of zooming out of that, and I was thinking about how over the course of time, there has been a transition of hyper capitalism, right? Accelerated capitalism, tons of like global market trades and open market trades and all this stuff. And there's like a ballooning of billionaires, and there's a ballooning of poverty at the same time. And so then I was thinking about humanitarian crises. There's multiple humanitarian crises across the board. One is the fact that I mean, I'm not a scholar of this, but I can put two and two together and be like, there was a time when there was a slower trade of hair, because let's just say the average Episcopalian didn't need a wig. You know, within the Jewish cultures, you also wear wigs. There's a lot of different reasons why people wear wigs, right? Or like apply extensions. But like there was a time when there was a slower gain for doing that. And there's this kind of opinion or kind of like way to absolve oneself where they think, okay, so this hair is actually taken from temples in India, and people are actually sacrificing their hair to the gods. And so they're leaving this hair in temples. And so then those temples decided one day to take that hair that women are like dedicating to these gods, and they're then like trying to gain capital from that hair through distributing it and then taking that money and bringing it back to the temples. That's kind of like the rhetoric around absolving oneself from this like humanitarian crisis. And so then you have hyper capitalism happening, right? So all of a sudden, like media it expands, and over the course of, say, I would say over the course of the last 7 years, there's been this real like gross appropriation of Black culture and the love of Black culture, but there's absolutely no love of the actual Black person and changing policy. So that's another form of gross humanitarian crisis that's happening on our own land. So within that desire and fetishization of wanting to emulate the Black body as a female, you have a hyper capitalized line of money making of hair. And that is when this kind of like initial slower economy around hair was hyperbolically transformed into one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world. But it will never be seen because it's happening to people that no one in the world cares about, because these are people that are unseen. they're offed all the time and no one cares. In fact, Modi, who is a genocidal maniac who kills Muslims left and right, has come frequently to the United States in open arms with all of our presidents. And there's lots of like tech work that that we're going to be engaging with in the future. And I don't think that Biden is going to change those plans. And so here we are working in tandem with like genocidal maniacs. We're having these like weird like white women who don't even like understand what it means to appropriate a Black body, like getting hair, and then like you have this expansion and hyper capitalism against like a body in a different place. Then on top of that, you have the ideas of the Black diaspora. So the other spin is I'm not in those spaces. I'm here, I'm from Texas, and I'm like essentially a brown girl in America. A lot of the people who are absconded with and put into these hair camps are Black South Asians. Those people are the ones that are getting murdered, and those are the people that are being capitalized upon. So what we are seeing here isn't a South Asian problem and an elsewhere problem and a foreign problem. We're talking about a Black diaspora that is unseen. And so something really fascinating happened that was very transformative to me over COVID, where there was actually one of the first meetings that I witnessed where a lot of really important intellectual figures came together to actually discuss that issue of like the Black diaspora in South Asia and some of the kind of crises that are happening around the unseeing and the unknowing of it, and unpacking white supremacy within those specific cultures. So there's a lot there. There's a lot that I need to unpack and research as I'm getting ready to make. So it's a lot. Like being an artist is hard. And then there's always going to be like my body is cheese whiz. There's always going to be a big gaping hole, you know, where I should have filled it in with information and I just forgot to, or didn't know to fill it in with information. So Jody, thanks for your comments. I can't believe all this is being recorded. Oh my God. Somebody.
Are you okay with that?
No, it's okay. It's just a lot. And like, unfortunately, I have to do a lot of emotional labor to share because I'm kind of trying to attack material and positionality that I haven't seen. Like, I don't care that I'm the 25,000th performance artist in New York City alone in the last 10 years that's worked with hair. I don't care. Like, I'm not trying to be an avant-garde or like some kind of a new person working with new material. I'm just trying to understand my own body's positionality. And I'm trying to think through like these kind of unseen pockets of global economy.
I'm glad that you're okay with with this being recorded and shared, because I don't know, it's been a pretty spectacular conversation. I mean, for me, just, you know.
I hope, I mean, because my fear is that I'm boring you. Like, my fear is that I'm just talking in circles and that I'm kind of just
no,
having
I mean,
some sort of an episodic attack even.
I just think, you know, your mind is leaping from, you know, and combining different discourses and subjects and making connections that are challenging to keep up with. But I'm pretty dazzled, honestly. Like when you were referring to fashion seasons having themes, for example, I just thought, wow, yep. And again and again and again. And I just think the way this conversation has been flowing, in a certain sense, mirrors in language the kinds of connections and layering that you do in your collages or in those seats that you made, that you know, pulled off the sound boxes and put on the wall, and, you know, in many other ways, just really interesting to me, combinations of ideas and traditions. So thanks.